Oh no. What does it mean? I don't even think about it. Need to stop.
For many years, Alison Krauss has been known for being in charge. In charge of her voice, which was clear and almost weightless. She had perfect control over her violin. Take charge of the career that turned a child star into one of the most acclaimed acts in Grammy history. She brought bluegrass to the masses with her 27 wins and counting. She made a name for herself with Alison Krauss in Union Station, sang in different styles with Raising Sand, and is in both the Grand Ole Opry and the Bluegrass Hall of Fame. It looks like a nearly perfect story on paper. But there was a part of her life that wasn't on stage. That, music, never quite got a handle on. The end of Krauss's marriage was quiet in 2001. At the time, the reason seemed clear, and the song even seemed likely. Two lives going in different ways because of touring schedules and distance. The story that way stuck for years. People who liked the book thought they knew what happened, and Krauss left the story unfinished but not challenged until now. When he turned 54, Krauss finally spoke out. And what she said opens up a truth that is much more complex than anyone thought. So why does she want to tell the whole story now? And why the marriage really broke up when everyone thought they knew the answer? Come with us as we reveal all the shocking facts. How Alison Krauss got started. Alison Maria Krauss was born in Decatur, Illinois, into a family that was both strict and creative and interested in new things. Fred Krauss, her father, came to the U.S. from Germany when he was 12 years old, bringing with him his language. He did this before he got his Ph.D. in psychology. He taught German while he was in school and then switched careers to real estate. He eventually owned a few notable properties, including the so-called American Football House in Urbana, a simple building that became an unlikely part of pop culture history when it was used on the cover of American football's first album. Louise Krauss, her mother, had roots in both Germany and Italy. She was also the daughter of artists. She used her eyes and hands to draw pictures for magazines and schoolbooks as an artist, and she brought that creative spirit into her own home. Fred and Louise met while they were both students at the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign. They both enjoyed learning and making art from the start. The family moved to Champaign after a short stay in Decatur after Alison was born. There, she grew up with her bigger brother Victor. It was never said that music would be a part of that house, but it was always there. Because Louise played the banjo and acoustic guitar, folk music played in the background, naturally and in a way that people knew. Any music of the time could be heard on the radio at the same time, and young Alison took it all in. She moved toward Gary Newman's Cars and leaned into them. Without thinking about genres or labels, he liked the smooth sounds of bands like Foreigner and Bad Company and the big sound of Electric Light Orchestra. Victor, on the other hand, was making his own way. In high school, he played the piano and double bass, which set him up to become a jazz and rock musician who can play many instruments. Alison was pushed toward classical violin when she was 5 years old, not because she felt like she had to, but because it was an option. Her mother believed in keeping doors open and wanted her to be active in art, sports, and music. It took Alison a while to fall in love with practice. She didn't want to take music lessons and dragged her feet through them, but she did traditional training until she was 11 and learned the basics even when she wasn't very interested. She put just as much effort into roller skating when she wasn't making songs. And for a while, it wasn't clear which way her life would go. With the help of her early teens, she finally decided that she would go into singing instead of roller derby. In the middle of 1979, Louise saw an ad for a fiddle competition at the Champaign County Fair. This was the moment when things really changed. She didn't think about it too much, so she bought a book on how to play the bluegrass fiddle and Richard Green's 1977 album Duets. Alison didn't take an academic approach to it. Her mother played guitar while she practiced on the violin. She learned by ear, taking songs from records, such as the Tennessee Waltz. When she was only 8, she joined the talent show in the novice category and came in 4th. It wasn't a win, but enough to get something going. She also met Andrea Jean there for the first time. Jean won the junior class that same year. This early meeting of futures would later feel very much like a planned event. She didn't do more music after that because someone told her to, she did it because it made sense to her. She learned that she could hear complicated sounds just once and change them right away into something unique.
The genre didn't hold her back, instead, it let her shine.
In 1981 and 1982, she was already playing fiddle and singing with Marvin Lee Lesnar's country dance band, even though she didn't look her age. In September 1983, her parents celebrated another important event by getting her a handmade violin in Missouri that was just right for her.
Her first full-sized musical instrument was a.
There was a quiet acceptance that this wasn't just a phase anymore. When the child was 13, the force was too strong to ignore. And the Society for the Preservation of Bluegrass in America named her the most potential fiddler in the Midwest.
She won the Walnut Valley Festival Fiddle Championship.
Vanity Fair later used the word virtuoso to describe her, which is usually used for artists twice her age. She met Dan Tyminski around the same time at a festival put on by the group. A quiet meeting that would have a big impact on her future. In fact, she met all the current members of Union Station at those events, long before anyone could have imagined what a group of talented people would become.
The rise of Alison Krauss wasn't loud in any way.
The story took place in small towns, fairgrounds, practice rooms, and by chance meetings that were put together by instinct rather than desire. The foundation was there, steady and clear, waiting for the rest of the story to catch up. It was there long before the Grammys, the legacy, or the careful control that the world would later connect with her name.
The music world was changed by Alison Krauss.
Alison Krauss wasn't just a talent that people talked about at events by the middle of the 1980s. She made her recording start on an independent album with Swamp Weiss and Jim Hoyes in 1986, when most kids were still trying to figure out who they were. Her brother Victor was right there with her. She was also playing regularly with bassist and singer John Pannell in a band called Silver Rail around the same time.
It was changed to Union Station when the name had to be thrown out.
It was a small change that turned out to be very important. And in the same year, she signed with Rounder Records, which gave her discipline without killing her instincts. In 1987, when she was only 16, she put out her first record with Union Station as the band's backing vocals. It was clear that her voice already had that stillness in it that makes people lean in instead of singing along. It didn't feel like a first try to get noticed. It felt like someone was coming that didn't need to be told. After that, there wasn't a rush to start over, but instead, the ground kept getting bigger. After a single album came out, a full Union Station project made sense. Then another. She gradually found a steady rhythm in her career, switching between working alone and with a band. This gave her the chance to explore closeness on her own terms and then return to the sound of the group that supported her.
If you remember her first big solo hit in 1990, it didn't come with a lot of noise or show.
It gave her quiet approval, record success, and her first Grammy. It felt like the rest of the business had finally caught on to what bluegrass fans already knew. It was clear that things were moving forward by the early 1990s. Another Grammy was given to her for a second record with Union Station. In 1993, when she was only 21, she became the youngest member of the Grand Ole Opry.
It wasn't just a big deal for me. It was
an important moment for bluegrass, which hadn't had one of its own before.
Welcome back into that group after almost 30 years. Krauss didn't show up with a flag.
She did not say a word.
She just stood there quietly and let the music do what it always did.
Collaboration stopped being a side note and turned into a quiet part of her work. She worked with traditional bluegrass bands, sang for country groups, and went into places she didn't belong without ever sounding out of place. It was a good fit when Dan Tyminski joined Union Station in the middle of the 1990s. His voice was not better than hers. They helped each other out. At the same time, Krauss joined the popular country music scene and earned chart. She achieved fame and a Grammy Award without losing the emotional control that made her work unique. By the middle of the 1990s, a compilation record had made her music known to a lot more people. By changing how she looked at things she had already done, not by following trends. It sold a lot of copies, which shocked her, won a lot of awards in the industry, and showed that her voice could live outside of strict genre lines without losing its center. She didn't slow down after her success. It seemed to make her more careful, if anything. That reserve was still there when another Union Station album came out in the late 1990s and shook up ideas about what bluegrass music should sound like.
Critics took note. More listeners came after.
Her music made its way into popular TV shows, presenting her work to people who weren't looking for it but stayed with it once they heard it. Soon after, she released a solo record that was more adult contemporary but still had the emotional honesty that ran through everything she did. Krauss kept working on other people's projects even as she put out her own records. She played the fiddle, sang harmony, and gave her voice to music from all over the world, from American roots music to Irish traditional music.
She never saw working together as an extra step. It was just a different way to listen.
Then there was the time when her sound filled all living rooms. She helped make the music for the movie Oh Brother, Where Art Thou?
In 2000.
Making a set of songs with Dan Tyinski that felt both old and new at the same time.
The album didn't just do well, it blew up.
It sold millions of copies, won Album of the Year at the Grammys, and many people say it brought bluegrass back into the public. As usual for Krauss, she pushed back on the story. She thought the crowd had always been there. She thought that the movie just took down the wall. Behind it all was the same thing, that clear soprano voice that was often called angelic without being showy. Many thanks to the artists who shaped her. From bluegrass stars to country traditionalists, they all wrote sad songs, not to make a scene, but because that's where the truth lived. Krauss didn't write much of her own music, not because she didn't want to, but because she was so dedicated to finding the right song and making an album around it. By the early 2000s, Alison Krauss wasn't trying to be relevant or change who she was to get attention. She had already built something more stable. A job built on listening, being patient, and refusing to put too much emphasis on things that were already strong.
The awards kept coming. The styles got fuzzy. The voice didn't change. Control stayed her mark through it all. All of that, though, almost came to an end in 2015. Alison Krauss lost her voice, and there was a silent fight that almost went away. Music. Alison Krauss's voice is what most people think of when they think of her.
It's soft, tall, and almost weightless. The sound that floats instead of pushing. It was her voice that took her through decades of music. In just over 25 years, it won her 27 Grammy Awards, making her one of the most prestigious singers in American history. That's why it was such a surprise when it wasn't there.
It always seemed easy in there.
When Windy City showed up, it was a strange sign. It was her first album by herself since 2000 and her first record of any kind in years.
The gap wasn't because ideas or interest were running out. It wasn't even close to that scary. In the years before the record, Krauss had been having trouble with her voice. The medical term for it was dysphonia, but the experience was anything but pleasant. Without notice, her throat would get tight. It was hard to sing because the sound was barely coming through the straw. The more she tried, the worse things got. Physical therapy didn't help at all.
Instead, the problem followed her to studios, stages, and finally to times she couldn't get away from. It took place in real time in 2015 during a live show in Utah. She stood up to sing the first line, but nothing came out of her mouth. Not a word, not a second chance, just quiet.
The kind that makes your stomach hurt.